Today we're making a Savarin cake, despite all the haters, very moist and fluffy, with a fruit insert in the middle, fresh fruit on top, pistachio cream. It's a whole madness. Hi, I'm Robert, and from today's recipe we'll get a cake of about 1.9 kilograms. We start simple, just like with the other Savarin recipe, with 200 grams of strong flour, meaning with high protein content. Check the flour package to make sure it ideally has 11% protein. I've already put the flour in the bowl of a stand mixer. Over the flour, we'll start to add slowly, mixing at first on low speed, and as we add more and more, we'll increase the mixing speed. 270 grams of egg, let's say about 5 medium eggs, but weigh them, it must be 270 grams, and I've beaten them slightly. I also added 10 grams of lemon zest, and as I said, we'll start adding them little by little to the flour. We begin with a slightly larger quantity of egg, about half of it, so that the mixer can mix and the dough won't be too stiff. After you've added almost all of the egg, we'll add 8 grams of fresh yeast, just crumbled a little, and add it inside and mix again. In this dough, we need to develop the gluten very well, so it becomes very elastic. So don't stop mixing until the dough is very elastic. I'll show you exactly the consistency we need to reach. This is where we need to get with the dough. See how elastic it is? Practically, I can't even pull it off the whisk. It's very strong. The gluten is very developed, and that will give us a spongy cake base that will hold its structure well when soaked. Otherwise, if the gluten is not developed enough, when the sponge is soaked, it will crumble and fall apart. At the end, we add the sugar, 20 grams, and mix very briefly until it's incorporated. Then we add the butter, 70 grams, and mix again for about 30 seconds, maximum 1 minute, until the butter is well integrated into the whole dough, on maximum speed with this mixer. In the end, we need to obtain this very elastic dough, which practically I can't even lift with a spatula. As I said, because we want its final texture to be spongy. What I didn't tell you, or maybe I did, but I'll tell you now, all ingredients should be warm, at room temperature, about 22 Celsius if possible. The eggs, the flour, the butter, everything. We'll transfer this mixture into a piping bag to distribute it more easily. For baking, I'll use this type of mold like a gulguf with 20 cm diameter, and with the piping bag I'll distribute it evenly. This is the classic Savarin shape, the French one. Go search Savarin on the internet, click on images, and you'll see that it looks exactly like this, with lots of fruit and less cream, not like ours with lots of whipped cream and no fruit. Because I'm already hearing, that's not the way you make Savarin. Well, that's how it used to be back in the day. Alright, we let the mixture rise for about 30 minutes at room temperature, or I like to put it in the oven and just turn on the oven light to give it a bit of warmth. Anyway, don't put it at more than 30 degrees Celsius, because then it will start acetic fermentation and it will taste of vinegar. About 30-35 minutes, then we move on to baking at 140 Celsius with fan, or 150 or 155 Celsius without fan. Same, about 35-40 minutes. Either do the toothpick test or measure the internal temperature of the sponge. It should be around 98 Celsius. While the sponge is rising, we have plenty of time to make the insert. I'll use a raspberry insert because the acidity of the raspberry cuts through the sweetness that the Savarin naturally has, and I really like this combination. Simple. In a bowl I put 14 grams of cornstarch and about 15-16 grams of sugar. Here I have 260 grams of raspberry puree. I buy it frozen directly. If you don't have it frozen or can't find raspberry puree, just take some raspberries, boil them a little or not, blend them, then strain the result through a sieve to get rid of the seeds. It must be puree, and from this liquid weigh 260 grams and that is it. Raspberry puree, nothing else in the one I buy, so no extra sugar or other things. Heat it just slightly, around 30 degrees Celsius or less, just enough so it's no longer frozen. That's why I warmed mine up, and I'll pour a little over this starch and sugar mixture. Mix, then return the whole quantity to the pot and boil it for about 1 or 2 minutes depending on the amount. Stir continuously while boiling, of course, so it doesn't stick, and this is how it should look. Thick enough not to flow easily off the whisk. If it's not this texture, keep it on the heat another minute or 2 or 5, however long it takes. Anyway, it thickens a little as it cools, which we'll do. We'll put it in a bowl to cool and see what's next. After the sponge has baked and cooled, this is how it looks. This one wasn't baked today, don't imagine. I prepared it ahead of time. Don't worry if it looks irregular on top, because anyway, from the whole sponge, we'll only use up to the level where it looks nice. It looks small, but when we soak it, it will grow a lot in volume. So simply with a knife cut all around until you cut it completely at the level where the whole sponge is straight, because when we present it on the platter it needs to look nice. This is how it will look. That's the baker's piece, and here the fresher and the warmer the sponge and the syrup are, the quicker it will soak, grow more in volume and be softer. If the sponge is a bit older, meaning it has cooled and stabilized, and the syrup is not very hot, it won't soak as much and will stay a bit smaller. But also, if it soaks too much, it's not good, because the more it swells from the syrup, the softer it becomes, and at some point it breaks. But neither should it not swell at all. So try one way or another, one of them should be cold. Usually we let the sponge cool completely and put it in a hotter syrup, so we have time to react, because if the syrup is too hot, it will soak in 10 seconds. If it's a bit less hot and the sponge is cold, let's say, it takes about a minute. So you have time to watch when it absorbs enough and take it out of the syrup. For the syrup, same as with the individual Savarin recipe, water, sugar, and I use vanilla and rum essence. I'll tell you the quantities, don't get scared because it makes a lot of syrup, but we won't use it all. We need a large quantity so we can soak the sponge well. So, 3750 grams of water, 1875 grams of sugar, and I use 8 small bottles of vanilla essence and 8 small bottles of rum essence, those little ones from Dr. Oetker, 2 grams each. But flavor it as you like. You can also add lemon zest or orange zest or anything else aromatic. Just make sure that the flavors match the final taste. The insert you'll put inside, the fruits you'll use, and so on. I boiled the syrup and put it in a big tray like this, so I have room to soak the sponge and give it space to expand. And I use this pizza tool tied with something so I can lift it out. The sponge is too big to take it out of the syrup otherwise. You need a platform to dip into the syrup. We'll place the sponge on it, that's how it will go. This sponge with the hole in the middle, I pass it through here, dip it in the syrup, and then using this strip I pull it out, let it drain a little, and place it on a rack to drain completely. This is the best solution I found. Maybe you'll find a better technical solution and let me know so I learn too. So the sponge into the syrup, and now with the spider tool I slowly tilt the sponge so that the syrup enters from above and soaks it well. It also absorbs from below, but we help it a little. I turn the sponge upside down to let the excess syrup drain out, and don't worry, it keeps exactly the right amount inside and it will be very moist and pleasant. And now to make it look nicer, and especially so it doesn't dry out, because if you put it in a pastry shop display, the air current dries it. I put here some apricot jam, blended with a hand blender, and thinned it with a little water. I boiled it until it reached the desired consistency, meaning it coats a spatula. If you dip a spoon or a spatula into it, it coats it. With a silicone brush, I brushed the entire surface of the cake, top and sides, and a little inside too, though there will be fruit on the inside, so it's not so affected. Almost done. The sponge has been in the fridge, it's cooled and stabilized very well. Because I choose to add an insert to this dessert, I'll use a small serrated knife to cut a groove all around the middle of the sponge, about 1 cm or a finger's width, and we'll remove this dough from the groove. Make it about 1.5 or 2 cm deep, so about half the height of the cake, so that the quantity of insert in each slice is enough and the raspberry flavor is noticeable. I made the insert and now in the middle we'll put fruit. I have a mix here, figs, because they're in season and I love them, and berries. You can add whatever fruits you like, as many as possible, so that when you slice the cake, they spill out and every slice has fresh fruit. Place them mixed to look nice. We'll set the cake aside for now and prepare the cream for the top, then you'll see. For the top cream I used 500 grams of Sublime from Elevir, which has 30% mascarpone and 70% cream. You can use the same product or about 350 grams of cream and 150 grams of mascarpone, or just cream if you want. Over that I added 30 grams of powdered sugar and 75 grams of pistachio paste. So 100% pistachio paste. Again, if you want to add pistachio, fine, if not, you can make it with simple whipped cream. We'll whip it quite firmly because the pistachio paste is very fat and tends to soften the cream, so it needs to be whipped strong. If you only use cream, don't whip it as much because it stiffens more when you pipe it. I put the cream into a piping bag. Here I'm using an eclair nozzle. You can obviously decorate the top however you want. I'm sure you have more imagination than me. I'll just make some simple loops. Don't be stingy with the cream, that's how Savarin is for us, with lots of whipped cream. Oh, and one more thing I wanted to say, the idea is to completely cover this groove. So make a loop that covers it, so the insert is not visible at all, to be like a surprise. The cake is ready and I say it looks fantastic. I can't wait to cut a slice and I can't wait for your impression and Instagram picture with tags and all that. For more recipes like this, don't forget to like, subscribe to my channel and follow me on Instagram for plenty of useful tips.